communed with. I would believe that Matthew, with how quickly he was willing to just leave his stuff right there. It says he got up and left. If a tax collector is in the middle of collecting taxes, what are they leaving behind when they leave their stuff? Money, cash, records, all of it. Leaving it all behind. If he's willing to do that, I am willing to deduce that he was anxious to live for a greater purpose. Anxious, desperate to live for that greater purpose. So, do we know anyone like that in our lives? I know people like that they won't turn to God for their greater purpose. They seek out their greater purpose in how they interact within their community, right? They become the heroes of the community, that greater purpose. Does it ever satisfy them? No, there's always another cause, right? Recently we had the bag ladies of Easton. They came into the town council and wore plastic bags, tied them around their neck nice and tight so that we would understand the effects that plastic had on the animals in society. So we got a plastic bag ban in Easton. Okay. Now I know several of those ladies have moved on to other causes. That's done. What else can I fill my life with? What other greater purpose can I serve? There's one we're missing. One greater purpose that's being missed on a regular basis. So that's Matthew for me. Luke. What do we know about Luke? Educated, right? Smart. Wanting to be helpful, right? Back then, were doctors so they could be extremely rich? I imagine there was some money involved in it, but overall, I mean, they're getting house calls at 1 in the morning. They probably have a very low patient survival rate just because of the illnesses and stuff we know they have at the time and their lack of medical knowledge compared to what we have today. But Luke's educated, which means he's studious, and he has the ability, based on his writings, to see and remember details that others do not, right? Of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, of those 4 books, you'll find that Luke is the most detailed in the conversations Jesus had. So Luke thought the little things matter. Do you guys know anyone like that in your life? Pays attention to all the details, the little things matter? Right. More importantly, as I ask if you know any of these people in your lives, do you know any of these people in your lives who haven't turned their life over to God yet? That's what we're trying to make the connection for. We're going to go through a few more here. Simon Peter. What do we know about Simon Peter? Big mouth? What? Impulsive? Angry at times? Very emotionally led. Is that fair to say of him? When he would make a decision, a lot of his decisions were emotionally based. If you know someone like that in your life, please raise your hand. That's been a big lesson I've tried to teach my children growing up, is making decisions based on emotion is dangerous. You make decisions based on fact. So you do not react, which is emotionally based. You act. Okay, I've talked about that in sermons before. So Simon Peter is someone who's very reactive. How about Andrew? Andrew was a softer person, wasn't he? We don't know much about him. But the first to follow, wasn't he? He recognized who Jesus was and stood in support of him. So this might be that person who recognizes who Jesus is, but perhaps loses the passion, loses the target. Do we know anyone like that in our lives? Right? Soft-spoken, not forceful in who they are. They know who they are. They know what they believe. They know what they're willing to accept. There are people out there who are faithful to people in their world. That if we could focus that faith to Jesus, to God, if we could help them with that, they would be the ones that quietly, I view a lot of people in this church as Bartholomew's. They're faithful. Never failing. Always willing to put in the work. Always willing to help others. But just consistent. And if we can get those believers, they're the foundational people of the belief. The ones that just qualities are qualities that are shared by people that we come in contact with every day. So this is what we had to train ourselves to recognize, right? The differences in those we minister so that we can find the best way to approach them with good news, right? So how do we identify these differences that we hope to witness to the people we hope to witness to? Let's go to James 1, verse 19. That's such a small book. All right. So, James 1, verse 19. Listening and doing. That's actually, I love that my Bible has like topic bolds above it. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For men's anger does not bring about the righteousness of life that God desires. Quick to listen, slow to speak. It's an interesting thought. I wonder if that's repeated anywhere. Let's go to Mark 4, verse 24. Mark 4, verse 24 reads, "Consider carefully what you hear. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you, and even more. Whoever has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him." Consider carefully what you hear. So when Jesus is even telling a parable, he's telling those around him to listen closely, right? Okay. How about Luke 8, verse 18? Luke 8, verse 18 reads, "Therefore consider carefully how you listen. Whoever has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what he thinks he has will be taken from him." This is the same parable told through a different set of eyes. But it starts with, consider carefully how you listen. We're going to keep on studying if we go to Colossians 4, verse 6. Who wrote Colossians? The zealous one. So Paul, being previously a very zealous person, writes, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt." So let's unpack what we've read so far. What do we need to be able to do? Absolutely. We have to be able to listen. I am guilty of speaking more than I listen. It's something that as I became a supervisor and now a commander, I went from being in charge of 4 or 5 people to being in charge of 30 or 40 people. And every day, people come in my office with concerns. Every day. Yesterday, I had put out 2 memos, a Facebook post, and helped an officer research an issue they were having, all over concerns people came to me with. It filled my entire day. What I've learned is I have to listen. And we're going to talk about the skills of listening and how to then communicate. So Colossians 4:6, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." What does that mean? Let your speech be gracious is pretty easy to understand, right? Be kind. Be thankful for what you are hearing and to the people willing to give you time and attention. But what about that part that says seasoned with salt? If you season something, let's go back to, we're talking about fish, right? So if you go back to the days on the boats and they would season something with salt, what were they doing with the salt? What was salt meant to do? Preserve it, right? Salt preserves meat. So if it's seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person, it's also cautioning patience. Listen to what they're telling you. Think about what they're telling you before you answer. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're talking about these fish, these people, these personalities, and these people we need to understand. We need to understand the fish. The first thing we have to be able to do is to identify what type of personality we are dealing with. What are the character traits? Who is this person? And then what are the approaches? My future sermons, we will be talking about how to approach each of these personalities. Kevin's covered this in some of our Bible studies that we've done very quickly about the different types of believers who will combat biblically what you say. But I'm going to break it down a little bit more basic and talk about how we approach just the typical non-believer in these different personalities. Romans 10:17. Again, Paul wrote this. So faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. If we are going to be the ones to witness to people, we first have to be people of faith, do we not? And then how are we people of faith? Faith comes from what? From listening. Absolutely. Proverbs 18:13. I love this one. I went Old Testament on this one. I saw it. I'm like, I love Proverbs. Those little nuggets. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. It is your own foolishness if you want to speak before you're done listening. Sometimes only you are affected, but the more responsibility you have, the more you affect others. And when you are trying to witness to the world, do you have a great responsibility? It's a huge responsibility. If you misstep, if you misspeak, if you say something out of character of Jesus, you are potentially turning someone from God. You are denying them the truth of heaven. So that's something to think about as we try to understand the fish. So we have to listen, we have to be patient, and we have to be willing to speak less than we hear. The only way that I know to identify the differences in these types of people is to observe and listen. Does anyone doubt that? Does anyone have a counter to that? I'm willing to listen. No? All right. So, was Jesus known as a listener? I think he was. How effective would the God of love be if he spoke before he listened? Think about that. The God of love, this whole thing, this whole great controversy is because Satan accused God of being a what? A tyrant. A tyrant speaks first, right? Here's my law. Here's what you will do. You will worship me, right? So the only way God can disprove Lucifer is to be patient, to listen, to watch. And that's what this is about, right? To listen. I know that God gives commands. I don't mean to misspeak and say that God is not someone who, he commanded all of us into being to begin with. He is someone who has the ability and at times has shown that he will do so. But when it comes to the great controversy with Satan, so Satan's still alive, right? What are the wages of sin? Is Lucifer a sinner? Has any other sinner outlived Lucifer? So why is Lucifer still alive? Because God's patience, God wills it. It's funny that Nancy's study this morning touches on almost every aspect of what I've talked about today. Satan is only alive because God wills it. So how does one listen? Let's unpack that for a minute. I'm going to give you the police perspective, okay? So I've talked about this before, but we're going to talk about interview techniques, right? So when I first started police work, we had what was called the Reed Institute approach. I hated it. It's when you're a rookie, you're 2 years on the job, you're like, this is great stuff. But the way they teach you to interview is manipulation. And it can be effective on the right suspect. However, if you get the wrong suspect, you will be shut down in less than 10 seconds. Absolutely. If they catch you manipulating, if they catch you lying, if they catch you trying to push them into the conversation in a direction, they will shut you down. And this is almost any suspect who has had more than 4 or 5 interactions with the police. That's very big. You open yourself up to questions in court. I've been questioned before. Did you lie to the suspect? Yes, I did. The only place I'm not allowed to lie is on the stand. court testimony. I can't lie on a search warrant. I can't lie on any court documents. But I can lie to the suspect. And I've done it. It's okay at times. I've thrown a videotape that had evidence tape on it, and said, there's a videotape of you committing the crime. And they'll go, okay, I did it. That thing might have Flintstones on it. I got no idea. It was sitting in the desk. It was an aid that was just sitting in the interview desk that when you got desperate, you throw it on the table, see if they'd say